Hello! Welcome back to another episode of the Obsessive Maker podcast. My name is Sian and I'm coming to you from Melbourne, Australia. And today's episode is all about my experience of test knitting the Souffle Tee, which is this beauty, by Laura of Penrose Knits. Now, it's a slightly different format today. I would normally show you my whips and any acquisitions, the usual podcast format, but I know I will have a lot to talk about, and rather than film an episode for an hour and a half, I thought I'd just split it into two, have one episode about this lovely mohair beauty, and another episode about everything else I'm doing. So, before we get started, I will before I tell you about my experience of the test knitting process, I'll tell you a bit about the pattern. So, I have with me a copy of the pattern because it has been a couple of weeks since I actually finished this, and I've moved on to several other projects, so I do need some basic reminders about the pattern. I won't tell you too much because obviously I don't want to give away too much, as Laura spent a lot of time and energy writing this pattern, and I don't want to give away any real spoilers, only to tell you that this pattern is size inclusive. And when I say size inclusive, I mean that Laura has gone out of her way to make sure that this is a 10 size, a pattern with 10 different sizes. It ranges from chest measurements 71 centimeters or 28 inches all the way through to 162.5 centimeter or 64 centimeter chest or bust. I personally test knitted size 7, which would have given me a 52.5 inch finished bust. And based on the recommended ease in the pattern, which I believe is 2 to 4 inches, and I'm talking in inches because that's what it actually says in the pattern, I decided to opt for size 7 because I thought, that'll give me the recommended 4 inches plus of ease. So for full disclosure, I have a 48, 47, 48, it fluctuates. And I didn't really want to go for the size 6 because that would have ended up with a 47.5 inch bust, which would have been, I thought, too tight fitting. So that was my logic around the size that I opted to test knit. So yes, it is a really size inclusive pattern. Laura does also include in the pattern, and I'm sure she's going to do this in the final version as well, a bit of a guide on how to adjust the bicep measurement, so how many stitches to choose for your bicep. And being someone with big biceps, I really appreciated that fact because I got to figure out and personally decide how big I wanted the sleeve cuff to be, which you don't often get. Quite often with actually not really chunky knits, but with the kind of smaller fingering sport weight sweaters that I've been knitting, I've had to add extra stitches at the underarm in order to make a sleeve bigger to fit my bicep. And I'm currently doing that with the Illuminate sweater. So I've added extra stitches at the underarm. I've changed the proportions of how many stitches and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, but to avoid all of that complication, Laura has done that for you in this pattern, which I really appreciate. So yeah. So the pattern itself is fairly straightforward. I think Laura has categorized it as a confident beginner intermediate, and I would definitely say that is correct. It is fairly straightforward, but there are some things in the pattern that I hadn't actually done before. That was the I-cord neckline. I'd never done that before. Can you believe it? I've managed to avoid an I-cord edging for the last, just over a year. And also a folded hem on both the bottom of the tee and also the sleeve cuff. So they were new to me, and then also the ruffle as well. And it's not necessarily a technical skill for the ruffle, but it was just the sheer number of stitches on the needles to bind off and that kind of thing, which is, you know, kind of exciting when you think about it. Anywho, so yes, so what else can I tell you about the pattern without actually giving everything away? So it comes in a short sleeve version and a long sleeve version. So half the testers were working on the long sleeve while the rest of us were working on the short sleeves, and I went for the short sleeve because it never gets cold enough here to wear a full long sleeve mohair fluffiness, and I just didn't think I would be able to, well, that I would find the opportunity to wear something like that. Also, I'm not a really fast knitter, so I thought short sleeve would be better. So yes, you knit this up on, well, depending on your gauge, it's what you would expect to be roughly a 4mm needle for the main body. And Laura recommends using Lang lace for this pattern, which has a higher silk quantity, higher silk percentage to mohair. So I actually bought some Lang lace for this, and I can tell you it is gorgeous and fluffy, but once I bought the colour, I wasn't certain I wanted to knit another green thing, so I'd kind of been working on greens and blues. So I ordered both Lang lace and Tilia, and when it arrived I decided I wanted to make something pink. And I'm not sure if this is coming out pink on the camera, it looks more red on my screen, but it is a beautiful pink. And this is a gorgeous colour as well, this Lang lace, but I just wasn't into it at the time. So I decided to go off-piste and use a different mohair than suggested. But I can see why Laura has suggested using this, because when you start to hold two threads, two strands together, the tilia becomes super fluffy, and there's nothing wrong with that, except it does make it a lot warmer, definitely. So I think this might have been a little bit cooler for me to wear. So yeah, so that's what Laura suggests. But you can use any mohair. A lot of the testers, well, all of the testers have used different types of mohair. They've gone for things that are in their stash, variegated. Some have actually done some pure silk versions as well. So really, I think anything lace weight will work for this pattern. Obviously, the yardages that are recommended in the pattern will be different, but you take that on board when you just do your calculations as to how much yarn you need to buy or acquire for the pattern. So yes, so I did buy this. I may still make another souffle in the future, or I may use this for another project, but I decided to go with the tilia. Now, when I bought the tilia, full disclosure, Laura worked with Simona from knit.co.uk to offer the testers a 20% discount on any yarn that they bought for the souffle test knit. I took full advantage of that, which is why I said I bought two kinds of mohair, because it actually worked out a lot cheaper than buying mohair here in Australia. I have to say, mohair here in Australia is not cheap. I know we're paying probably mainly for import taxes and things like that, but in this case I was happy to wait the 2 weeks it took for international postage to get these over from the UK. It was just so much more affordable. I have digressed again. So yes, that's what I was saying. So so obviously Laura in the pattern has suggested how much yarn you will need for the size that you're knitting. That then obviously will differ if you change anything in the pattern. For example, I ended up knitting the sleeves an inch shorter than recommended, basically because I wasn't sure how long the sleeve should be to create a bit of puff, but I thought that the shorter the sleeve, the better really, because then it would create some puff. Whereas if it was longer, I thought it would lose a bit of puff and also might dangle over my elbow. So I opted to get the bare minimum of yarn for this size. And when I got probably halfway through, I had a panic. I had a bit of a panic attack, and I'm like, I'm running out of yarn because I'm, got to the body and I'm holding 2 strands together, and I was like, oh God, I still have the sleeves to do and I still have at least 10 inches to knit on the body. How am I going to do that with 4 balls of mohair? And yeah, I just had a panic attack. So I ended up ordering 3 more balls from a local Australian online store in the same colorway. They weren't the same dye lot, but they ended up being pretty similar. So these are 2 different dye lots, but you wouldn't really notice, to be honest. So for the rest of the body and the sleeves, I held the 2 dye lots together, and you can't really tell, which is great. So all this to say really that I had that panic for no reason, because I didn't need those 3 extra balls. I ended up finishing the souffle with this much left over of my original order. So if you want to figure out or find out how much yarn I actually needed for my size 7 with 1 inch shorter in the sleeves, I have all of that information on Ravelry. And you'll also see all the other test knits there as well. Some of them have more information than others, so go to town, feel free to have a look. But honestly, Laura's suggested yarn yardage or meterage is bang on if you're knitting the size that if you're knitting to the dimensions that she recommends in the pattern. Rambling. So yes. So that is all I'm going to tell you about the pattern. Did I mention it's a single strand of mohair in the yoke and 2 strands of mohair in the body? Did I mention that? It's been a while. I'm out of practice. Well, it hasn't been that long, but anyway. So yes, the test knitting process. I really actually enjoyed it. I wasn't sure I would enjoy knitting to a deadline, and I'll be honest, I don't enjoy knitting to a deadline. I do tend to do it to myself quite often though. But you know what, there was so much kind of camaraderie and support amongst the test knitters that it really made the whole process just really fantastic. I had to knit monogamously on this for literally the whole period of the test knit, and I think once I got the yarn, I had about 4 weeks left to actually finish it, so I managed to cast this on and finish it bang on 4 weeks, which is quite a feat for me, particularly as I have the attention span of a goldfish, and I do like to have other projects, and I did actually work on a couple of other projects a little bit just to kind of cleanse the palette from this. Because after working with mohair solidly, it was nice to have something that I could just, give my hands a break. But can I just say, I'm not sure how other test knits work, but being part of the test knit group and having access to a group chat was absolutely fantastic. Excuse me. Everyone in the test knit group was so lovely and supportive. We would each share like wins and fails in the chat, and photos of our progress, and obviously any feedback directly to Laura, because Laura obviously was kind of heading up the group. And she was so responsive and would take on all the feedback like a champ. Not that there was anything drastic that needed changing, but you know how it is when something you create is your baby and you have a bunch of people who are telling you what works and what doesn't. You have to, be kind of not really swallow your pride, but you have to be open to that feedback, because at the end of the day it does benefit you. And Laura was absolutely lovely. She was fantastic. Towards the end, when I got to the point where I'm like, I really need to, I don't know how I'm going to finish this on time. This is what I'm thinking in my head. I'm not going to finish this on time. What am I going to do? I feel like the body is never ending. And I was like, maybe I need to switch to the sleeves. So I posted in the chat that, you know, I'm struggling, and everyone's like, just switch to the sleeves. It'll be like a palette cleanser. Just do that. And once you've done the sleeves, it'll feel like you haven't got that much further to go. And so I took their advice. I did it, and it really got me through. So yeah, Body Island is not great, and on anything it's not great. I'm currently on Body Island on the Illuminate sweater, and it's killing me. I'm so bored. Anywho. So yeah, they were just really lovely, and it was really nice to see some of the slight modifications that the other people who were knitting my size did, and to see how it fit on them. So, you know, it's kind of like you get to see in the moment during the essentially like the creation process or the testing process, all of the changes and feedback that everyone else has. So, you know, when you go and find a pattern on Ravelry and then you stalk the projects, the completed projects in that page, or you stalk the completed projects on Instagram, and you're like, oh, what did they do there? And I wonder how it would look on this type of body. And I wonder how it would look if I shortened this, or if I had to lengthen that. Or, I'm not quite sure how the bind off on the neckline will look. And yeah, it was just really nice to see that immediately in the moment, and we all kind of progressed equally. I mean, there was some really fast knitters, of course there always are, and there are some other people who were doing the long sleeve versions and the larger sizes, so of course it was going to take a bit longer for them to do theirs. But it was really nice to kind of have that sense of camaraderie, and that we're all kind of paced together. So yeah, it was lovely. It was really nice. So yeah, the whole process, I really enjoyed it. The only thing I didn't enjoy was a deadline, but then I don't enjoy deadlines anyway. So will I do a test knit again? Maybe. We'll see. I have been tempted by Laura's more recent design, the Chantilly cardigan, but I think I am going to take a break from test knitting for now, because I do have other things I need to crack on with. So yeah. So that is pretty much everything I have to say about the test knitting process. It was enjoyable, and I have made some lovely Insta friends from it, which I hope we will continue to remain friends. So yeah, I think it's yeah. If you're new to knitting and you don't know many people, and you kind of want to create a little sense of community, or be part of that community, it is fantastic. And actually, I will say one final thing, that being part of that chat group, and not everyone who was testing was part of the chat group, I think a few people opted out, but I personally found that absolutely fantastic, because I didn't feel like I was knitting in isolation. I felt like I was part of a group, that we were all kind of in it together, and that if I had questions, I wasn't afraid to ask them. And it wasn't just, you know, Laura's experience of the pattern and what to do in the pattern that I benefited from. It was from everyone else's experience knitting, and different techniques that they shared in, for example, how to bind off with a crochet hook, that kind of thing. So things that I hadn't done before. And so I felt, yeah, I really felt part of that community group. And yeah, it was really nice. So now I think that's pretty much all I have to say about the test knitting process. But I hope that was helpful for you. I do know that Laura has officially announced that she will be releasing a pattern on Friday the 8th of March, which is in less than a week's time. So if you are thinking about this pattern, I would highly recommend giving it a go, showing Laura some support in her journey to becoming an awesome pattern designer. And I really think she's going to make some more amazing things. Looking at some of the things she's got going on in progress at the moment, yeah, I'm really tempted by that Chantilly cardigan. So anyway, so if you are thinking about it, I hope this little video has helped clarify a few things for you. There might be some things that you wish to change, having seen it in person on me. Perhaps there are some things you would like to change or modify when you knit it up. Personally, I would size down next time. I would knit the size down because I realized that it doesn't have too much ease, but I do think the neckline for me was a bit too wide, and that was probably my own fault, really, my own issue, where I was so scared of doing the I-cord neckline too tightly that I perhaps did it too loose. But I think I would definitely size down, or I would knit the yoke a little shorter, because having a larger bust, you can kind of see my bra here, which is fine. If you have a nice bra and you don't mind showing it off, that's fine. But a lot of people do kind of want that a little bit more modesty, so they might knit it a little shorter. So for example, that maybe an inch shorter. And I think I would benefit from it being a little tighter, that's all. So yeah. But other than that, that's the only thing I would change. And honestly, you can use any mohair with it, as I've proven. A bit of Filcolana tilia, super fluffy, super cozy, and yeah. I will post a few photos. If you've been on Instagram and you've had a look at my post there, you may have seen some of those photos already, but I'll post a few more here at the end of this episode just to show you. But for now, I think that wraps up this episode about the Souffle Tee by Penrose Knits, and I will see you again next episode, which will be very soon, to talk about everything else I've been working on. So until then, have a fantastic day.